So when you think about accident counts in the US, we went through a recession in 2008, 2009. Vehicle accident counts fell to a low of about 17.3 million. And we've since then recovered and seen a couple of years of some pretty substantial growth in accidents. But now we're starting to see sort of frequency level off. We expect that the roughly about 24 million vehicles were in accidents in 2017, and that number will likely continue to grow as we continue to see the population of vehicles on the road in the US also grow. This is data from Fast Track looking at auto claim frequency, how many accidents there are per every 100 insured vehicles. And so what we can see is that if you go back as far as 1980, auto claim frequency in the US was much higher. Safer roads, safer vehicles, programs like Mothers Against Drunk Driving, all of those programs have helped reduce overall accident frequency in the US, and it's been a steady decline over the last several decades. During the recession, that dipped further, and now coming out of the recession, we've started to see it elevate, and now it's really essentially, in large part, starting to flatten out. So unless we see a major economic change within the marketplace, it's likely that we are going to see relatively stable frequency and severity, which we'll talk about as well, moving forward over the next several years. Why that is if you think about the US, our population in the US continues to grow. The US Census Bureau estimates that the US population will grow about another 2.3 million people between now and 2030. If you look at where people are living in the US, growth among southern cities is the highest, it's about 9.4%. Growth in western cities about 7.3%, while growth in the Northeast and Midwest is much slower at about 1.3% and 3% respectively. And so people are moving to areas of the country that are not necessarily well known for their robust public transportation. So you have more people employed, you have more people on the roads, living in places that don't have public transportation, you have higher congestion, and you have continued relatively high counts of accidents. The unemployment rate in the US slipped to 3.9%, the first time since 2000. I'll have, most of you know that my political leanings might be different from others, so I'm not going to necessarily give anybody credit for this. But we do know unemployment rate slipped to 3.9% after about 6 steady months at about 4.1%. So there is a healthy amount of employment in the US. The overall labor force participation rate remains relatively stable, hasn't changed a great deal, but most people that want to have a job can find a job right now in the US. And we're seeing obviously more people employed, which means more people are on the road during peak labor time or peak driving times, which again will help keep accident frequency high. The other piece of this is while ride-hailing was anticipated to be a major disruption for our marketplace, it ended up being a much more significant disruptor for the taxi industry. If you're Michael Cohen, you're not so happy you own taxi medallions right now. Of course, he's not very happy for a lot of reasons. But if you look at ride-hailing in general, it's essentially disrupted the taxi industry most. It's also disrupted the rental car industry. If you look at business ground transportation expenses, the latest data from the company called Certify is about 65% or more of all of the ground transportation expenses are now being spent on ride-hailing, with a significant hit to both rental and to taxis. And in several studies, there have been a number of studies performed. This is data, for example, from the University of California, Annenberg. Their data showed that in 7 cities, including Boston, Chicago, New York, San Francisco, and the like, over about a 3-year period between 2014 and 2016, after ride-hailing services were introduced, that they actually saw about a 6% reduction in public transportation use, and that many of the users of these ride-hailing services actually owned vehicles and owned more vehicles per household than people that didn't. So it hasn't necessarily led to people shedding their vehicles per se, but we do know that it is now resulting in people that might have walked or taken public transportation previously now switching to using ride-hailing services, which has added a great deal of congestion in some of those cities like Chicago and San Francisco. So that's all I have. I'll finish up with sort of a Cliff Notes summary, which is frequency is likely going to remain sort of where it is today. Repair costs will continue to go up. We'll continue to have a fair number of total losses until a lot of that older fleet is worked off the road. But we do know that this technology is coming out, and it's coming out starting now in sort of meaningful volumes. So we do know that there will be changes to the marketplace. and just understanding some of the timeframes for that is obviously an important element of what we all do on a day-to-day basis.